Hi Giovanni, welcome to Get Me Experts and the HR Summit. Since you are an expert in HR analytics, we'd like to discuss more about your experience with the HR analytics. Is there a difference between MIS and the analytics part?
I think there is a difference. I think you can't get to analytics without having MIS, but MIS is definitely not the same as analytics. Right? I think MIS, operational reporting, is basically running your kind of run-of-the-mill HR reports. I think analytics is really when you start using some of that data to start making predictions for the future, or to do some level of trend analysis or deeper insight for the past. I like to always say that operational reporting is about getting data and see how you're doing. Analytics is about getting insight, actionable insight. That's the real difference. The other thing I would say is that I don't necessarily think that everyone who knows Excel knows analytics, but I do think that you don't need a fancy system. You can actually do quite a bit of analytical work through Excel. It's kind of like if you don't know, like riding a bike, if you've never ridden a bike before, it's not a bad idea to ride a bike with the safety wheels, the training wheels. That's what Excel is.
Okay, that's a good analogy to support. People believe that that learning tool is the main analytics part. What is your opinion about that?
I think there's several important parts to any analytics journey. I think the tool is probably the last of it. The problem though is that people usually get excited with the tool, because the tool is what you can show off to your leadership and the fancy dashboards. But I think unless you understand that you have to do a lot of the prep work before that, whether it's cleaning your data, organizing your data, and some of this work is not very sexy, but it's incredibly important, because a tool or any technology platform, without the right input, without the right context, and without the right guidance, it will never give you the right answers, right? There's no solution available where you just plug it in and it immediately gives you insight. So I think people need to do a lot of prep work before getting to the fancy tools. And that's why I said earlier that you can actually do a lot of work with Excel. I think it's good to do it with Excel because it's limited from a technology perspective, but it kind of forces you to think more and really plan things out. And then once you have that stable, migrating it to an actual tool is a lot easier.
So in analytics, there are a lot of things, you see the trend, but the ultimate aim is, to predict something out of it, In your own experience, did you do some kind of predictive analysis about certain behaviors, certain trends in the HR?
There's a lot of things like we have done, and there's a lot of things you can actually do. But I'll say there's very few companies that are really at that cutting edge level where they're able to predict, right? Everyone wants to do that. Everyone looks at what Google is doing, but what they don't realize is Google put a lot of work and a lot of time in getting where they are today. Some of the things we looked at is performance, especially from a hiring perspective, being able to predict performance. So we did a regression analysis on some of our top performance in sales, and then we did the same for some of our bottom performance, and we did the same for like a control group in the middle. And we looked for personality traits. We did a host of psychometrics, motivational surveys, feedback from their direct supervisors, feedback from the team, just to try to build a profile to see what is it that the top guys are doing differently from what the kind of middle guys are doing versus what the bottom guys are doing, right? And then when we found that, we tested that again to say, okay, now let's make a questionnaire, like a test almost, that allows us to measure those traits. And then hopefully, if you do it right, the top guy should score consistently higher than what the bottom guy should score, right? So we did that, and we were able to predict with 85% accuracy who would be a great sales agent. And the interesting thing is, it wasn't necessarily the typical things that people were looking for. Some of the things were quite typical. Empathy was very important. A certain level of well, I wouldn't say aggressiveness, but I would definitely say a certain level of commitment in terms of following through and pushing through. But it just shows that once you start looking at the data, you can actually see patterns that you couldn't see before. I actually think that one of the things that every company can do, and it's not so much predictive, but it's very powerful to get buy-in for your analytics, start by quantifying the impact of attrition or turnover, right? And it's very easy. You know your average salaries by grade, you know how many people left, you know how long the position has been vacant, so you can calculate the lost productivity, you know your recruitment costs, your training costs, potentially the cost of the manager, maybe you have to take 10% to kind of onboard a new person. So if you know all of these things and you have a value for all of these, and you can actually say that attrition at this level on average cost us X. And I think that's very powerful. Rather than going and saying, oh, attrition went up by 1 point or 2 points, you're able to say, you know, that there's actually an opportunity at the table that if we reduce attrition by, let's say, 2 points, we can save 3 million.
Yeah. Let's say direct, relation with the.
And then you start talking business language, and that is really the power of analytics, where you start solving business problems, in this case bottom line, through HR data.
I think that's a very interesting point which you are bringing. So HR analytics is not for the HR per se, it is basically to solve the business problem.
I think any support function is there to solve business problems first and foremost, and I think, it's fine to also solve HR problems, but at the end of the day, the objective should always be you need to solve business problems. You want that seat at the table, you want that strategic seat that all senior HR officers or HR directors want. Talk business language, solve business problems. Too often I see HR professionals getting bogged down in solving things that are cool for HR to know, but have no real meaning for the business, right? At the same time, I often find that the things that you solve in HR usually have a link directly to the business. We're talking about people after all. It's just about finding that link, highlighting that link, right? And making it very explicit. So yeah, I think you should start by solving business problems through HR data. I think one thing I would say, usually when I do talks about this topic, focus on the right questions. Before you start the journey, what are the questions that you need answering? And those questions should be business questions, right? It might be what's the cost of attrition, it might be are we hiring the right people? Whatever it is, figure out anywhere from 5 to 10 questions and do that together with your leadership team, not just within the HR department. With your leadership team, figure out what are the top 10 questions that you need to have answered through people data or through.
Thank you very much. It was very interesting to understand your perspective, and especially from linking HR with the business results. I think that's the bottom line here, that how we can solve the business problems.
Yes.
Thank you very much.